Um, and I don't remember, like, I think last time we began working within surrender to the God within, pathwork at the soul level. And just for people that might be viewing this video new, it's one of the compilations of pathwork lectures around a certain topic. And this one is sort of focused on that connection to the divine. um, and how do we work with sort of the transpersonal level of the path work. So this chapter is called Choosing Your Destiny. And so I guess we'll just go ahead and begin. It says, I bring you God's blessings, my dear ones. When an entity undertakes to incarnate into another life on earth, it brings to it the tasks it has to fulfill. The plan is outlined, and in many cases, the spirit itself has the right to discuss its future life with those spirit beings whose responsibility this is. Like, so, they're kind of giving us this idea that, there are like other beings that help us and have this responsibility of, helping us choose our next lifetime. And I think he says in some place, maybe here, that the more, we have developed, the more we can contribute. So to a certain extent, according to our already acquired vision and capacity to judge, so we'll decide how to choose the destiny and how that might unfold. So in the spirit state, like we all of us, the entity, all people have a wider view than when housed in a body. So they talk about in another lecture how when we incarnate, we actually have amnesia and we don't remember anything else besides this life. And that's done for an important purpose. So, but when we're in the spirit world, we have this broader understanding of all of, our journeys and lifetimes and issues that we're working on. And at that time, we understand that the purpose of life is really not to have a vacation, right? It's not to have it as comfortable as possible, but to develop toward a higher state and to reach perfect bliss as rapidly as possible, which is a state that does not exist on earth. So the entity knows that only through spiritual effort can its spiritual knowledge penetrate its intellect. But it also knows that it cannot easily achieve this and that once incarnated, difficulties, tests, and even so-called disasters are often necessary to lead one to the right path and the right attitude. So, does that make sense to people? I find, this way of looking at the larger soul journey and that, we do have some choice in our, destiny and what we came here for and our purpose and what we're working on, um, as like an important understanding and useful one, mostly, because I think it's a more life-giving story than our sort of cultural egoic story, that says, well, we come here and we succeed or fail, we, kind of make it or don't. And, we should all kind of follow everybody else and make it that way. It's like, to me, the whole purpose of life is to really become who we are and to explore and to, bring out into the life, what our inner, impulses and attitudes and energy is. And as we do that, life mirrors it back and reflects it so we can see who we are. And in some ways, even the spark of God, which is in everyone, metaphysically, is for the same purpose. Like God spread Himself into everything in creation in order to experience who God is, right? And so, in some ways, we're all sort of involved in this process of uh, incarnating, and becoming more than just the universal one God in all these many, entities and beings, and we have all of these different experiences and different qualities and combinations of qualities that we bring into the earth plane, and we're unique. There isn't another being like us that's ever been. And we came in with the intention to go through certain things for the purpose of growth and learning. So how does that strike everybody? Is that something that feels comforting or less comforting? I'm just kind of curious.
Uh, this is where my resistance to pathwork lies, because
Okay.
there are certain lives that look at us like, why would I choose that? It's like,
Yeah.
and like, while and I can't imagine while you're living in that life, like all the atrocities that certain people like suffer through. Like, how do you even like get that spiritual wherewithal to like understand that this is your task and like to like overcome it?
I mean, good questions, and I kind of follow. Like, there is this, from the personality's point of view, like that. It seems like it's going for more suffering somehow or something, but I really think like if we have this, and this is where I would say, like you kind of get this from perspective. So at 73 years old, I can look back and I can see that a lot of the challenges and the suffering and the losses and the issues that I went through actually serve to form and shape and deepen and develop me. And it's kind of also the same in the shamanic understanding of life, right? We don't come here to ascend, we come here to go into a descent, to meet everything in the soul, to encounter it, to experience it, so that we can then have free choice, that we know what we're choosing about. And if we can make the connection between cause and effect, which is part of where we suffer because we don't understand, we don't have the large enough picture, and so it seems like it's senseless suffering, or it seems like we don't understand how we're creating that or why we chose that to go through. In usually in the moment of it, it's like I find that in general the pathwork gives us some tools to like trust and open and be with it, at least, because when we react and judge and fight and feel victimized, feel miserable because life has done something to us, that doesn't serve growth either. Right? And so there's kind of a way where we can, like really sort of sit with these challenging times that we've had, and oftentimes, even all the way back to childhood, a lot of the difficulties we're having is kind of recreations of sort of misunderstandings that we found, that we got caught in, or maybe we brought in to clarify in this lifetime. And so, we choose, the parents, and of course, no parents are perfect, and we choose them based on the fact that they can give us the fundamental basics that we need to survive, and then they also give us what I would call the sacred womb, right? And so, like, if without the sacred womb, the guide says, we would not really focus on what we came here to do, because it's such a vast and broad thing that we kind of get configured around our pain or our struggle or our challenge in this. But that helps direct the growth and the purpose of the growth in our life. So let's see what else the guide says. I have a feeling this lecture, may also bring some more up, but those are great questions, and that's a good discussion topic list. So let's see as we go forward. Does
Can I,
anybody else wanna? Yeah, go ahead,
yeah,
Frank.
I want to add something to to his question. And that is that 99% of the people who live on this planet don't have this knowledge. They don't know that they've come in, that they've made the choice to come in and face these conflicts. They just think they're human beings in a state of victimhood. And
And it's just a material universe, and there's nothing beyond, you
right,
know,
right. And if they
this
knew
life.
this, if they had this knowledge, if everyone on this planet had this knowledge, you could bet your boots that people would not be treating each other the way they're treating each other, and they wouldn't be treating themselves the way they treat themselves. It's just that simple, but they don't have this knowledge.
Right. And I think it's, there's the intellectual understanding of it, which is, beautiful and interesting, but like it is kind of like somehow, and I've spent like all of the years, I started Pathwork in 1984. And, like this is part of the pathwork that really helped me understand that, like it is 100% self-responsibility, and everything that happens is, kind of happening for us, through us, to teach us and guide us. And so, like, even in some of my hymns, I say, our life is our guide, everything that, is reflected back to us, is got some lesson, and sometimes it's not so easy or clear to understand it. We have to, this is why I like this focusing and stuff, because we have our understanding and our stories and our intellectual way of looking at how our life is, and most of this is in the deeper unconscious. And so if we don't have a way to access some of the deeper unconscious parts of ourselves, then it makes it more difficult to recognize this is here. But so we're bringing in Lori too, and Elizabeth, welcome. Um, so, so we're talking about this idea that we came in, with a vision, a destiny that we brought in, that before we incarnated, we kind of we chose things not to be so easy, but to help us learn and grow. And so it's in this part of the challenging, the tests, the so-called disasters that are part of the life that are often necessary to help us recognize, what's happening, how we're creating the difficulty, what the right path and the right attitude might be. And so he says, again, memory, fades automatically the moment matter envelops the spirit. And he says this is essential for spiritual awareness, has to be fought for. And this can happen only when one takes the trouble to search within the self. Again, we have free will, and if we don't want to seek, nothing compels us, except that, sometimes our struggles do, our trials do, right? So again, I think some of the purpose is, to, we usually spend the first half of our life struggling to figure it out, with our mind and master ourselves, and then usually by midlife we recognize that we can't do that very well. We're not really much further along. We are, but we haven't mastered anything, and we recognize that we really don't have a clue. And it's that humility that it takes, half of our life to get to, in some ways, so that we can again seek, go beyond what we think we know about things, and to be um, trying to understand, even the challenges, the struggles, the sufferings that we do encounter. And what really causes most of the unbearable suffering is what the guide calls the hard pain. And that's usually because we're judging the suffering, we're judging ourselves, we're judging what is. And then when we contract against that, we end up feeling the loss of, the connection with our own self, and with our life in a healthy and loving and positive way. And so that is where really sort of unbearable suffering comes from in life. The guide talks about life has pain. We're here in the world of light and dark, you know, uh, pleasure and pain, life and death, and so we have to embrace the both and of this life. And it's the child consciousness within us that resists that and wants it all to be perfect and tries to force it or control it or make that happen. And so that's where, we struggle and we try for a long time, and then we begin to surrender. And that's a part of the title of this, whole little compilation is how we can learn to relax more into life, trusting that it really is leading us and guiding us. And the more that we can pay attention and seek, the more we learn and the more we grow. So, only within one's soul can one recognize the very special meaning and purpose of one's life. Everybody's unique. Nobody else can really understand it except for our own self within us. So together with the individual tasks that one has to fulfill, right? So I don't know if he says it here, but we kind of have two things. We brought in these, like soul task to bring our gifts into the world, to give something to life. And we also brought in our individual task, that is, what the distortion is, where we're, what the learning is, what we brought in to encounter in life to try to transform it. And oftentimes, it can be simple, pride, self-will, and fear are sort of the three main aspects of the lower self, personal lower self, that we come in to work on. And where there is those currents, and we can, even have good motive and a positive intention in some ways, but where those currents are intertwined, the results will be less than what we really had hoped for. So it's by learning, how we are actually manifesting and creating, the difficulties that we might encounter, and realizing that those things are like mirrors for us to learn from. And to do that, without judging ourselves harshly, because we're all human beings. And if we're, really judging ourselves a lot, in some ways we have too much pride, right? We don't need to feel shame, and pride and shame are kind of the flip side of the same coin. So, if we feel shame around, and judge ourselves around something that we've done, that we have to learn forgiveness and acceptance of where we are in our own learning curve, and double our efforts maybe, or recognize, and make a prayer and make an intention to, go beyond and learn. But a lot of it is, we sort of are naturally, when we're free in our spirit, in our soul aspect, we naturally are this love. We naturally are, the positive feelings. And so where we've gotten lost and in darkness, right, it's just a block. It's something, where we're resisting the natural movement of life, the flow of life that could bring it back into, its divine purpose and understanding again. So I know I'm talking a lot. Is there any questions or anything on that people want to chime in here? So continuing with the lecture. However, those who constantly allow themselves to be impressed by the outward aspects of life on earth, so we get attached to the material, to the addictions of life, lose this inner meaning. And sometimes we have to go through life after life without much progress, incarnating again and again for the same purpose. And, it's like it can be a challenge, for us to wake up out of it. But it's, I think we can't go beyond where we're at, and we have to just trust that, where we're at is exactly where we need to be in our learning curve and our journey. And so the spirit knows this danger of earthly life, but it knows also that if one lives life in the right way from the spiritual point of view, one can develop on earth disproportionately faster than in the spirit world, exactly because it is easier there. We can ignore, we can, not pay attention. So the difficulties on earth are mainly connected with matter and all that implies. And this is so partly because the memory of the spirit realm has been extinguished and needs to be regained, and partly because matter contains so much temptation. So in a way, it's a wall between us and the spirit world, and in another way, it kind of lures us and draws us and distracts us. Um, and again, this is not to say we should be ascetics or deny the pleasure and the goodness of life on earth, but there's a difference between avoiding our spiritual journey, uh, and turning away from that spiritual journey, and paying only attention to the material realm that we see a lot around us. So it says only those who overcome these difficulties can win and make the best of their lives on earth. The spirits about to be incarnated know that they need hardships to shake them into wakefulness, so that they do not get imprisoned in matter and all that matter attracts to it. Before incarnation, therefore, a spirit may ask the higher beings, I beg you, help me, not only with your strength and guidance, but also when you see that I am not fulfilling myself, send me tests and trials. For when these come, I have a better chance to wake up and look at my life from a different point of view than when everything functions regularly and without friction. So it is important for you to recognize that many of the events in your life which seem to repeat themselves were chosen and planned by you when you still had your wider vision before matter enveloped your spirit. It will be helpful for you to know this. A very ambitious spirit may sometimes even ask for a particularly difficult destiny, knowing clearly in the state of freedom from matter that the pain to be suffered is little and of short duration comparison to the gain. This should give you food for thought. And I think it's like interesting also to look around, like oftentimes we look at other people that are suffering and going through, worse trials than we are or something like that, and it scares us, we think, oh, there before the grace of God go I, it's like, and it's kind of not the best of attitudes, I think, but what we can understand is that each soul is choosing exactly what they need. And so if you are not, you know, struggling or suffering under those kinds of circumstances, it's like it's you're working at a different level or you're working on a different thing, right? And so we don't have to get into comparison, and we don't have to get into, like, I mean, some of the distortions and some of the churchianity stuff going all the way back to pilgrims, I think was, like, well, if I am successful in the material realm, that means God loves me, right? And God favors me, right? And so these are the kinds of distortions that we might get caught in some way, and we have to experience a whole lifetime or more to find out differently. So, and then, like you said, I know some beautiful souls, some wonderful, wonderful people who struggle so much and have so much, I think sometimes physical stuff is karmic, like, and we also carry ancestral, aspects that we're here healing. We know even epigenetically that the trauma that our ancestral families went through, impacts us. And so the way I kind of see that is like each soul not only is here serving itself, we come in to serve our own growth and development, but we also, are in communities and soul bands and, families that incarnate together, and we care a lot, for each other. And, we also, incarnate in lineages. And so, the line that, you're in, you're also serving in some way. And that means carrying its gifts, but also carrying some of the distortions that might have, entered into that line. And so, we're here doing this work of purification, basically. And what the guide is saying is that only on earth are the conditions such that it really accelerates the growth and development. When we are, where things are less dramatic or intense, or, like somehow we drift a little more, we don't focus in the same way. So, uh, you know, we can, this is one of the things when I talk about, we're coming up on Thanksgiving and gratitude, right? And we need to be grateful for the challenges, and even like I'm thinking of, grief, and a lot of us are working with grief in various forms right now. And in a way, grief is this, also testimony of our love, right? When we feel the pain of grief, the loss, it's also like we don't want to not feel that, because to not feel that would mean we wouldn't care, we wouldn't love, right? And so we have to find a different relationship to the suffering and the difficulty in the physical world. And the more that I've learned, of like, opening my heart compassionately, being present to it, not trying to, run or fight with it, justify it or demand somebody else, fix it. And then I find a way to be with it and move through it. And that's really the beautiful power of the work. And as we do that more and more, we gain this beautiful capacity of our souls back again, and we incarnate it here on earth, which I think is, we're not here trying to get better so we can go to heaven, is my feeling. I truly believe, that some souls may be involved in, some of that and moving on, but a lot of us, I think, are really here to bring heaven to the earth. And the earth has served for a long time, also in this place of duality and suffering. And she's completing her journey in that. And she is ready herself to metamorphose, to transform, and the life on this planet then has to follow her shift. And so we're kind of at a time where those that are going to continue in this kind of karmic form of learning will, my understanding is, no longer after this lifetime incarnate on the earth, and the earth will be, doing something else with the people that continue with her. And there's not a blame, or, there's no, like judgment in that. Everybody has free will. We can only learn at the true pace of our being. If we try to go faster and further than we actually are, then we're just masking and pretending. We haven't really grounded and developed the firmness of that transformation. And so we have to allow it to take the time that it actually takes, and to learn it, not just intellectually, but genetically in every cell of our bodies, right? That we know this deeper thing. And then, we won't fail to act from there. So, says, I suggest to each one of you, my friends, to think about your life, your trials and tribulations. Ask whether they could not have been chosen by yourselves to make sure you do not remain unaware of something that you should fulfill. contemplate from this viewpoint what you should still find and solve within you. If you search for it with your entire will, the answer will be given to you. You will sense it. You will be given insights. This too has to be learned. It needs practice. And this is one of the things I'm working with, this new system of sort of inner inquiry that I feel like is really useful for this kind of thing. And we can, connect with these, our higher self and our guides more and our unconscious darkness with this. So he says, do not believe that the ability to meditate will come by itself. It needs willpower, perseverance. You have to fight your negative currents. And that's a kind of discipline. I don't know whether I would get into a fight with it, but I would firm myself as best I could in my, positive intention. And then if my negative currents showed up and I was in resistance, then I would take the focusing and be curious and go in, what is this negative current that's blocking this, good movement that I want, within me to, meditate or to, deepen my spiritual connection. And then we can, like work with that. It's like everything in us naturally will grow except where we're stuck. And then, where we're not growing or where we're aware that we're kind of stuck, then it's not like to add more willpower and try to make ourselves be better or do it better. It's more like put your attention on what's blocking that thing that you intend or want that's not working out for you. So, and then we can unravel the resistance that's there, and that will naturally allow the movement that we're looking for. So any questions on any of this so far? Any comments?
You're right about trying to fight your negative currents, because I try to fight with my lower self all the time, and it just gets stronger and stronger, and is like, yeah, you might be able to put it away for a while, but then it'll find the wound within you already and sneak back in, like very sneakily, and then all of a sudden now you're back in it.
Exactly. And the guide is saying, like that negativity comes from confusion, distortion, a wound of some kind, trauma, defense, right? And so, we can't just jump over it. We have to dismantle it. We have to heal it. We have to transform it within us. And we have to, what he calls, re-educate the inner child, because part of it is coming from a misunderstanding, what he calls the image, that is like some kind of projection, a belief about life coming from our experience, our history. But then, when we label life that way and we're expecting it, now we're actually sort of drawing it to us. And there's resonance and magnetism, right? And so our thought forms and our expectations and, the way that we just naturally structure the world, which is kind of unconscious and habitual, is part of what, we're up against. And so we're looking at all of these things, and the best way to do it is just when you feel the resistance of something that in your higher self, you want to choose, it is your free will choice, but you don't seem to have the free will to enact it. That then what you want to do is go in and work with these parts. Who you are is the divine essence of your being. And these parts are lost beings in some way, and confusion and distortion. And so they need your love and understanding to see how they are confused and lost. And then once you can get that, you can also have the conscious awareness of what they need to guide them back. And you also have the resource for them that they need. So when we can embrace and work with, those parts instead of fighting with them, they generally transform easier. Now, there are certain categories of beings that are very dark or, sort of collective negative entities. And so there might be some additional, understandings and support. But for most of what we're carrying, it really just helps to go be with it, be curious, be compassionate, try to understand, because so much of us, that's just what we need. And when we look for it outside of ourselves, and everybody else is also seeking that, we need to first discover how we can, the higher self of us can befriend and guide all of the rest of ourselves, parts that we brought in to work with. So, does that make sense? So he says the reward is great and truly blissful when we work with, and transform these negative currents. The effort is worth it when the spirit world recognizes that a person does this with sincere goodwill. Then guidance will be given also from the outside to help you achieve what you intend. Angelic beings, ancestral guides, all kinds of, energetic and loving support and, wisdom can come to us. And when a spirit realizes after life is over and it has discarded the material shell, that it has not fulfilled everything that had been planned, it is often allowed in the spirit state to bring the past incarnation to completion, to finish tasks already begun and shed some burdens. One can then continue to be involved with his family or whatever group of people he had intended to accomplish a task with only as a spirit. It is much more difficult. So this is where, you pass on and you might come and try to, continue working with, your grandchildren or whatever, that are here, and they're maybe carrying some of the issues, and you can do some help with that, but it's much more difficult than when we're physically with each other and how we can impact and care for each other. So it is easier from the spirit world, in the sense that we have clear vision, and the clear vision is restored, the extinguished memory is regained, and one understands what it is all about. But it is more difficult because the possibility of working effectively is much reduced as a spirit. For instance, a living person can influence another especially effectively by overcoming his or her own faults, right? Like I can, like really influence, those that I love most by doing my own inner work and becoming a more loving person, right? And it's amazing how well that works. Um, and also indirect influence. This indirect influence is always effective and lasting, where we're, like living the teaching that we're trying to bring. An example is always more convincing than words, persuasion, or forcing one's will upon the other, no matter how right or well-intentioned one is. To the degree you overcome your own weaknesses, affirm the spiritual laws within yourself, and learn to love, you will get closer to your fellow humans where you need it. It must be so according to spiritual lawfulness. This is indirect influence, but eventually the result becomes evident to everyone. However, as a discarnate spirit, you cannot do this, for most people are not open to receive what a spirit is trying to convey through inspirations, even though Les Elizabeth, somewhere along the line, she's coming back in. So this eventually the result becomes evident to everyone. However, as a discarnate spirit, you cannot do this, for most people are not open to receive what a spirit is trying to convey through inspiration, even when they perceive it. They often misinterpret or forget it, so it is much more difficult and takes much longer for anyone as a spirit to finish the task begun on earth, if it can be accomplished at all. One may still need another earthly life for this purpose. Thus, every human being and every spirit erects the world in which he or she lives. You build your home in the spirit world after your life on earth, and you build your future life on earth. Every act, thought, and feeling has its form, which then builds the spiritual home, even though only temporarily, as well as the fated events of the future incarnation. So, all this represents not only the natural outcome of the person's individual attitude and outlook, but the spiritual forms so constructed indicate exactly what this entity needs for its further development. So, the guide talks about this in other places too, like, what we're doing here that seems immaterial, our explorations of our attitudes and our positionalities and, our ways of harmonizing and, serving and supporting and learning and growing, all of that kind of thing. It's like actually builds structures, forms in the astral. And those, like he even says in one place, like those forms, like where they are of divine quality, right? Help us connect and it's part of the process of, evolvement. And so what we're creating on earth or in that other plane again is just this mirroring and this reflection, and it's also then where we live from, where where we have negative attitudes, they create negative experiences. Where we have love and positive attitudes, we live in peace and harmony. And again, it's not like you can just make the other stuff go or make yourself, be loving or have these more positive things. It's a developmental process. So we just embrace everything just as it is and focus our intention, in making our free will choices. Do you long for love? Do you want peace and harmony? Do you want brotherhood? Even though you may not know how to achieve it and you may argue and compete and feel, you don't like most people, right? That may be what you're carrying, but who you are naturally already holds the templates and the desires for connection, for, love, for service, for, compassion and creativity and bringing your unique gifts to the world so you can share them. So every human being and every spirit erects the world in which they live. You build your home in spirit, and then you build your future life on earth. And so all this represents not only the natural outcome of the person's individual attitude and outlook, but the spiritual forms so constructed indicate exactly what the entity needs for its further development. Meditate on these words, for they contain much. They again exemplify that the equation must always come out right. Hardship is self-created, yet precisely because of that, it contains the only medicine there is. Through this, you can fathom the vastness of divine wisdom in its magnificent lawfulness. Whoever understands this will also understand that destiny and free will are not two mutually exclusive factors, but are interwoven and connected. The events that fate brings to you are spiritual forms which have to manifest in a concrete way. If through ignorance of these laws, unfavorable forms are created, each being has to dissolve them himself, and this can happen only by entering a spiritual path of inner discipline, self-knowledge, and self-search. So the will to change. For all of this, you need willpower. And this is a different kind of willpower than our outer egoic willpower, I think, that he's talking here. So many of you, my friends, will say, that's all very well, but one person is born with a strong portion of willpower and another is not. So how can someone who hasn't got any willpower make use of it? Let me explain. willpower, just as any other quality, has to be engendered and built up by yourself. I would say divine willpower, or something like that. It cannot be otherwise. A person born with a strong will must have worked to acquire it, and I have a strong will sometimes, but toward the negative, or towards the defense. So again, we're talking about a very specific kind of, inner will towards the light. And then if they have good discipline and, they have acquired that in sometime in the past. So he or she could bring this valuable possession, if I may call it that, along. And now it can be put to good use. If this hasn't happened yet, the person should work for it in this incarnation. The same holds true for all the other qualities, whether it is the capacity to love, to have tolerance, kindliness, or anything else. I would like to show you how each one of you can acquire willpower. For God never asks for the impossible from anyone, my dear ones, ever. And so willpower is a direct result of understanding, of knowledge. And so this is what we're, trying to say, like it's not about the outer will, but, when we really recognize, what's going on within us and we have that knowledge and understanding, then of the decision that we're making and stuff, then the change can happen. So for every human being has a certain amount of strength, and it is entirely up to them in what direction to channel it. Many people waste this strength, either in useless efforts which build nothing that is of spiritual value, or they give over to sick, unpurified emotional currents. I think the other thing that kind of hijacks, the will in the material world a lot is addiction kinds of things, right? And again, we go to addiction as a way to avoid feeling what we're really needing to feel and face what we're really needing to face. And so, and these are addictions not just of substances. We have all kinds of unconscious addictions that sort of run our lives, that we're programmed. And so we have to kind of work with each one of these over time. And then, of course, I think, it would take many, many lifetimes, and so in some ways we can feel the improvements that come and the freedom that, happens as we go. And, we just want to keep following that direction and not worry about like, oh, I have so many things that I have to, fix. It's like life kind of is the guide, and what you're working on is going to be up there for you. It's going to be in your face. It's going to be showing up somehow in your life. There's going to be disharmony. There's going to be, frustration with yourself or others. There's going to be some kind of situation that, like it triggers you, right, and catches you up. And so, that's where our work is. We don't have to fix everything all at once or, take it all on at the same time, but just taking on what's here for us now. So when we, waste energy, like with these unpurified currents or not doing anything of any real value, it's like there's a spiritual law that energy used for spiritually positive goals is always replenished. But when your strength is caught up in negative circles of spirituality and unproductive currents, it gets depleted and wasted because it cannot be renewed. And I feel this a lot, whenever I get hooked and can't, be present enough to make a different choice, and I react to something, like I can feel after the aftermath of it, and especially as I'm getting older, our life force is, less sort of resilient in some ways. And so you get more conscious, like, oh, like every time I get mad about that, I'm just like wasting my life force energy. And so, as we have the wisdom of age and choose, hopefully that helps us choose not to do that. So this is why you see so often that people who do a lot of good seem to have superhuman strength. And those who know what life is all about will channel the energy at their disposal wisely and reset the inner switches accordingly. When one just drifts along without giving a thought to the true meaning of life, much of the energy will go into false channels and thus be used up without sufficient renewal. Thus, the first step toward willpower is meditation. Because for someone who has gained a certain understanding, it will be easier to draw the relevant inner conclusions and to make the outer decisions that follow from them. It is a decision and an inner reorientation when a person can say, well, if I live here on earth for a certain reason, maybe I lack the willpower to fulfill the purpose of my existence as well as it could be possible by overcoming all my resistances. But I will ask God for this willpower. For basically, I do want what is good. I will take the time and make the little effort to reflect upon these things and upon myself, to divine enlightenment, and devote regularly, daily, 20 to 30 minutes to my spiritual life. And when I find that at first I still lack the willpower, then I will take this problem into my meditation, into my dialogue with God, and thus help my still weak willpower to grow. Everybody can do that. This much willpower, this much self-discipline is available to everyone. You do not have to start with what is most difficult. After all, you do not start with the roof when you build a house, but with the foundation. The idea is to shift the energy and the emphasis. When a person finally makes this decision and abides by it, a decision that is not too difficult or too much for anyone, then the spirit world will also help to strengthen his or her willpower. So like we add a little effort and, it's multiplied by all of our spiritual assistants. So that the further and actually more difficult steps of development will seem much easier. And I can promise this to you, my friends, and some of you can already confirm that it is so. And thus, even the person who initially was lacking in willpower will, in due course, have just as much as those who were born with it. So the will to meditate. Any questions, comments on that last bit? For me, I still, ADHD, consistent meditation practice. But this is one of the things that I really like about this inner relationship focusing is I find that it's exactly what the guide is kind of like hinting at that we do. And it's like I can kind of do it, like it's probably good for those that can to have a regular practice, and it helps just to have our kind of reptilian brain there, kind of helping support those things. But if you're like me and you don't have that kind of support, then, you can just dedicate, yourself to, being aware when something inside wants your attention, when things are out of sorts, when there is a disharmony. And maybe you're too triggered in the moment, and you're still engaged in some kind of thing. So you need to wait till you can disengage and go sit with it. But, that's really where the, sort of leading edge of your development is. And if you can, just have the opportunity, whenever you're feeling it to go be with it and, listen and connect and engage and learn from it, and oftentimes when we just do that, it transforms itself, right? That, this movement will, serve in, this deeper understanding that the guide is saying that will help with our willpower as well. And so it kind of becomes a benign circle, that strengthens as we go.
I can kind of see why I lack willpower and like this life force energy, and because it's being used for like unproductive reasons. Like for example, like it bleeds out. Like if somebody hurts me, I'm gonna hurt them right back, or find a way. And it's not purpose. It's not for the use of good. And that's why I can see like where I get stuck in a rut, stuck in the mud almost. And with the under focusing that you showed us in the GPS, I tried it, and like I did see like all these, like I saw like three child parts in like one session, and I was like, oh, that's where the energy is going.
Excellent. Yeah, exactly. And it's kind of like, we can't just get rid of those child parts or, like make them grow up. We have to help them, re-educate them, understand them, guide them, have compassion towards them, and help them understand, so like you're saying, when you get attacked, again, it's kind of, there's a certain aspect of our physical nature, that is our animal nature, and there's a kind of fight flight, sort of response when, we're attacked or something happens. But even in that, like we're trying to transcend that, we're trying to transform that, and the best way we can do, because oftentimes what's triggering us, what the person is doing, is not really dangerous, but it may connect with some past history, with some other situation that was very difficult or something like that, and so we're kind of preemptively trying to defend against it, so it doesn't become that. And then of course, when we're preemptively trying to avoid it, we actually are actually drawing it to us, because that's the way the defense kind of works. And so, and that's how we are kind of forced through destiny or through our design to keep confronting the things inside of us. And if we can, yeah, just recognize, oh, who is that in me that like, and get so affected by what that person just said or what that person just did. And what's the deepest, like, so there's maybe anger at the top, but where's the hurt and the grief underneath that? And if I can get to that, and then I can maybe also see where my child had a history of sort of being hurt with that kind of negativity from others, right? And so we can understand, and we can befriend and say, okay, so yeah, I get it, but you can't, not everybody can understand. And so we I can protect you, but not through a defense. I can just guide you to know what's important and what isn't, and so when that person is acting like a jerk, don't take it personally, kind of thing, right? Or there's a deeper level that we can get to in the process. And so that's just a kind of off the cuff example, but exactly. So, when we can go in and, not try to control ourselves, but try to unravel and heal ourselves, then I think it makes a big difference. And again, we have to have enough, self, like choice, like we want light and we see the darkness, and we can't control the darkness sometimes from being in us and coming out of us, but that's what we're asking, that's what we're praying for. We're seeking help with that, and to study it more deeply, to understand it most fully, will be the best approach to transform.
Often, oftentimes though, I do notice that my lower self, like I want to befriend my lower self, but it's like more out of manipulation, and it's because my lower self has a lot of energy that kind of like this self here doesn't have.
And that kind of gives you a sense of greater life capacity somehow.
Yeah.
You like it. You have lower self pleasure. It's what the guy, like we get, you have lower self attachment, and pleasure involved, and lower self intentionality. And so, that's where maybe the willpower can be applied a little, like to recognize, oh yeah, like I like that or I want that, right? And then if we own that, if we really take responsibility for that, and we look at, okay, so I'm getting my kicks out of that, but what's the negative side of it? What's it costing me, right? And then that can also help us, clarify our inner choices, and awaken us to something else, like what the guide is saying, we have to give up the negative pleasure before we can find the pleasure that's even greater than that. So like to the degree that the power and pleasure in your lower self is there, and when you're in your regular self you don't feel so much all of that juice, right? And you want the juice. What he's saying is, but that's your kind of your numb self, or that's like your adapted self or your compensated self. When you touch your real self, your real light, not your negativity, you will find more life and more power, and more joy and pleasure there than anywhere near anything that your lower self could provide. So yeah, Lori.
So like, so isn't that where you say, or the guide says, like, even in the reason why is the negative is actually a positive with a distortion?
Yes, exactly. And that's the other thing to to try to understand, because like the pleasure is good in life, and so if we don't get pleasure from real things, then we want to get pleasure from something. And so like even in that, we can't condemn the beauty of life and pleasure. But yeah, so and what the guide is saying is all of our lower self, all of our negative aspects, he said, were originally divine qualities. And so when we can transform them back into their positive divine qualities, that will feel much more powerful and juicy and life affirming. Um, and again, if we judge, if we reject, if we think that we're wrong or bad, and undeserving of God's love because we have these faults, you know, that doesn't really serve. We need God's help. We need to sort of be able to run into his arms when we fuck up, when we recognize that we've, done something, from our lower self. And if we go hide in shame, right, that we're now avoiding God, who's the only thing that can help us really transform. So, when we become aware of our faults or our failures or our inadequacies in some way within the divine light of how we want to be, how we know we need to be, if we can just forgive ourselves and keep reaffirming and learn from that mistake, and then when we condemn ourselves, we can't learn from the mistake. We just cringe and go close our eyes. We can't bear to look because it brings up so much shame. And so when we can really face these faults and flaws, that's how we can learn. And to do that, we have to know God forgives us, and that we forgive ourselves, and that we just have to pay attention and learn from that and try again. And it's also a kind of humility that comes with that, right? So he says the decision to develop your willpower has to be made at one time or another. Did I skip anything? To summarize, to obtain willpower, you have to first gain understanding, and second, make the decision that follows from it. Therefore, if you feel that you don't have enough willpower, you lack the illuminating understanding of what it is all about. So, yes, you may have a vague sense of the meaning of willpower, but your soul is not yet penetrated by it. Maybe because something in you resists and clings to the comfortable, undisciplined old attitude. You are then split inside. One part has some spiritual knowledge, yet the other part does not draw the conclusion from what you feel sort of vaguely. And this is also in that focusing, like we're getting more clear about these vague feelings, right? And trying to sit with them until they really become conscious. And so this is why the first step must be to deepen the superficial knowledge, to work on that first, so that the whole personality is penetrated by understanding. When you do this first, and you can, if you take a little trouble and time, you will certainly make the decision and have the willpower to direct your life and your energies toward the spiritual, recognizing and fully understanding that only in this way can you also solve the problems in your earthly life. And this is how a person creates within the self such a powerful energy that all the subsequent steps upward on the path will become easier and easier. As always and in everything, the beginning is the most difficult. From our perspective, we often observe that people who believe that they do not have enough willpower would have it if they directed their available energies into the right channel, if they would only reset the switch. But only the insight into the necessity of this change will make you act. As long as you deceive yourself into believing that you can manage without it, you will not act, but you will amble along as before. The pursuit of a path that seems comfortable, however, means that the relationship to God is not entirely harmonious. Whoever meditates and reflects upon things in this way will have to arrive at the right conclusion and will have to make the right decision, so that life becomes a living religion and not just a theory. I love that. Religion is actually linking us back. It means to link back to the source. And if we are just believing in something, right, or have a theory about something, we can't really live it. So do you think that we expect too much of you? Is it too much to devote a little time and effort every day to look into yourself, to find the areas where something is lacking, so as to improve your spiritual awareness? And when the willpower is not there, and it is so difficult to muster a daily discipline, then after asking for help, search into yourself to find what it is that hinders you so much. If you are afraid that you might find something that you would rather keep buried, then you will benefit from using simple, healthy logic, which will tell you that nothing can remain hidden from God and the realm of spirit, and not even from yourself, once you return to that world. And the sooner it surfaces, the better for you and the easier to deal with. For you know that what is hidden brings far greater conflicts than what is out in the open, recognized and integrated. Your psychologists know this too, so that you are quite aware of the fact that you gain nothing when you close your eyes to that which is in you. Think about this deeply so that the knowledge takes root in your soul. It will be to your greatest benefit. When you have overcome the initial difficulties and have won some mastery over yourself, at least in this respect, then the spirit world will show you the next step on your path, what has to be worked out and fought for. Life will present it to you. When you have learned to meditate in the right way, you will know how to view and review every event of your daily life with open eyes so that you understand its messages. Even those friends who have overcome the initial difficulties do not always use their quiet hour in the best way. They meditate too often in general terms, always in the same way, not only when praying for other people, but also for themselves. Your meditations and prayers must vary. You need to sense the next step of your development. And when you are not aware of it, the insight will be given if you search honestly, turning your eyes toward what has to be recognized, learned, overcome, and accepted. So wherever we're, when we sit, wherever we're feeling, contraction, disharmony, resistance, that's where the work is. So take the specific problem of finding your past direction to God and to Christ and to your personal spirit friends who are so close to you and whose task it is to help you with it. In this way, your prayers will come alive. Then, after you have asked for help to recognize your problems and for the strength to solve them, be still and listen into yourself and let your thoughts surface and allow them to lead you intuitively. After a while, the connections will become clear. You will know where the problem comes from, why you react the way you do, and the increasing awareness of your inner currents will help you forward. Again and again, make the resolution to face your inner truth with courage, cultivate truthful thoughts, think everything through clearly, independently, newly. A lot of times, that's why I like the focusing because, like we're thinking about it, but we're just going over the stuff that we've already thought about before and the old story that we've, got in our heads and, we're just recycling stuff. And so we want to feel something new. We want to learn something new in our meditation. And so thus your spiritual life will become more productive because it will be alive and therefore also constantly changing. It will not be according to a rigid formula, which is repeated daily. And so your relationship to God will unfold toward harmony. Think about my words, which I was permitted to give to you today. They should take you a little further on your path. And then we have also fulfilled our task. We spirits who work here rejoice when we see that these words bring you a little closer to God, to your real self, to your happiness, and to your inner harmony. Receive the blessings of salvation. May they penetrate you. Go with God. Go in peace. God be with you. Okay. If I can stop the share and see if there's any final comments or questions before we close. I think we lost Frank. Okay, so I think this is a beautiful, good lecture. I hope it was, useful and connecting for you. And we'll do it again in 2 weeks. We're just going through this book on surrender to God. I'm not sure. Let's see what the next chapter will be. It says it's about happiness as a link in the chain of life.
Darlene,
So,
I have a question just because I'm new. What is the Pathwork?
excellent question. So, so this woman by the name of Eva Paracas trained when she was fairly young. She was she lived in I can't think of Austria, and she moved here right before World War II. And but when she was over there, she was recognized. She was a dancer. Her father was an author, well-known author, and so she was kind of in the circles. And back in those days, they were doing a lot of spiritist kinds of things, seances, automatic writing, training to connect with the spiritual realms. And they recognized that she had a gift in this, and so she worked with them and trained. And then after she started with automatic writing, and after quite some time, and after she'd come to the States and had to learn English and everything, I think the first couple of lectures she channeled by the guide were actually originally in German. And then, she began channeling in English. And so it's a body of material that was channeled from 1957 to 1978. There's 258 lectures and some additional materials. And in that, it's considered, sort of a complete spiritual path. And the guide himself says, like he came in at this time. There was this new spiritual influx on the planet, preparing the planet for a transformation and a new understanding of what life is on this planet. And so he came to, begin to bring the information that we needed in that process. And since then, like it was during the same time, Esalen and, things from the Eastern religions and, psychedelics and, all kinds of things came in at that time, kind of breaking us out of a kind of limited consciousness, right? That we were in. And then I believe that, this work, this process and the work that he's describing is still, we're still working with it, still preparing for some larger transition that's, coming. Um, and so he's talking about the purification work that is needed to be done and the understanding that we need to have in order to kind of help us in this process and also help us, sort of, like, have you ever been frustrated about, being alive on this earth and, where are the instructions? Nobody gave me an instruction manual for this life.
Yeah.
Right. So to me, Pathwork is kind of like an instruction manual.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Anybody else? Anything else? Hey, Frank, good to see you again.
Thank you, Darlene.
Yeah, I guess I would, from what I would say to add on to it, like, I don't know, I'm still struggling with a lot of it, but I feel like the reason why I stay attached to the Pathworks is because, like, I think of, like, people will say, well, there's a Course in Miracles, and it's like, okay, that the Course in Miracles is like a boot camp for like how to defocus on the material world. And then there's like, all the spiritual channelers will say stay positive and try to redirect the law of attraction. And I feel like the Pathwork is another wonderful tool that actually allows the people that are seeking the understanding of that at a level of, it's like it gives us the ability to actually even understand. It's like spiritual psychology. So it's like another section of the pie. So they all kind of seem to, from what I see.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I love that about the Pathwork too, because it doesn't say, well, this is the only truth and you can't use any other truths, and I see a lot of developments of many, somatic therapies and many spiritual therapies and the guide talks a lot about energy. And so like, like a lot of what's developed since then, almost everything that's out there, I can find reference to it in the Pathwork. Somebody may have taken it and deepened it and really, filled it out much more than the guide did, but it's there in that initial thing. And so it's kind of almost like this, transmission of this new understanding, for us. And then it's been emerging and developing and coming to us and through us this time. So, and yeah, we're still, in the midst of it. And I do like, this other pole of it, instead of trying to just stay positive, to really look at, and go into the descent in the underworld. And it's a more Western shamanic kind of path. And then I think, sort of the Eastern and Course in Miracles traditions and that kind of thing. But they're all excellent. And like like Laurie said, like they just have different, like lenses on this same, beautiful problem that we're working on.
Mm-hmm. Spiritual psychology. I like that, Lori.
Okay, and hopefully, I don't know. I'm gonna just throw this out. I decided, I was gonna do a little group as well. If any people, I know you're doing different things with me, so this one may be extra. But like I was just aware of in this whole process, like how grief is such an important part of the journey. And of course, after the election and after, like who knows where we're going, and there's a lot going on. So I'm doing another 2 week Zoom thing, every 2 week Zoom thing for a couple hours, called Good Grief. And it's a kind of a dive into exploring the healing aspect and how we move through loss and change and the grief that brings. So if anybody's interested, you can let me know. I think it's also, I can't even remember now. I think it's also on a Sunday night, just an opposite one. So those of you that are doing the Sunday night class, you'd have 4 Sundays in a row or something like that. But okay.
Thank you, darling.
Thank you, Darlene.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Darlene.
everybody. Great to
Thank you.
have you. Hey,
Bye.
Elizabeth. Take care. Love y'all. Bye bye.
Love you. Bye.